The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have Alfonso Lopez with us today from the House of Delegates. Good to see you again, sir.
Good to see you as well.
This is the first full week of the 2016 legislative session. Last Wednesday night, the governor gave his State of the Commonwealth address. What did you take from that?
He's focused on what's important for all families in Virginia: jobs, the economy, economic development, workforce protection and workforce development, and training. Those are the things we should be focused on. Those are the things that we can be, I think, bipartisan on in Virginia.
Now, do you have any different committee assignments this session, or are they about the same?
I have the exact same committee assignments I had last year: science, technology, militia and police, and as well as ag, natural resources, and Chesapeake Bay.
And tell us a little bit about what's going on back home. What kinds of things did you hear during the last election cycle, and also what kinds of issues of concern are you hearing from your constituents now?
Things that matter to folks in my community are affordable housing, education funding, and then to a certain extent the environment. People talk about the environment a great deal in Northern Virginia, at least the folks who come and talk to me a lot. Affordable housing is so very important. I represent one of the poorer areas of Northern Virginia. In fact, it's very socioeconomically diverse. There are 108 languages spoken in my district, and 58 languages. 108 languages spoken in my district, and 58 languages spoken in my local high school, Wakefield High School. And you have every economic structure, people living in mansions, people living on the margins, and needing the social safety net to get by. And affordable housing is incredibly important, just along the Columbia Pike corridor where I live. And so because of how expensive it is to live in the D.C. metropolitan area, being able to live close to where you work, being able to afford just getting by from day to day and paying your rent and paying your mortgage is something that looms over people a lot.
So what's the solution to create a more affordable housing environment?
Well, I was very proud of the fact as a freshman I was able to pass the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, working on the incredible work that former State Senator Mary Margaret Whipple did. And we were able to get $8 million to capitalize the Affordable Housing Trust Fund for the entire state. Well, that's significant, and because of that bill being passed over the span of its first year, we were able to help thousands of people, literally thousands of people, avoid homelessness, be able to afford housing in their communities, but also for localities to make grants to directly address homelessness as well. So, and also, we just found out that because of the bill's passage, 84 individuals were hired, and with the $8 million investment, we created $15 million worth of overall economic input and for the entire Commonwealth. And so it's a program that works. It helps people avoid homelessness. It helps people afford housing, and not just in Northern Virginia and in urban areas, but all across the Commonwealth. And if we were able to really capitalize it and have a dedicated source of revenue, think of what good we could do, how many more people we could hire, how many more families and children we could keep out of homelessness and keep in their local schools and close to work where they need to work, but also how much more we could be bringing back in terms of money to the state. So I'm working with Delegate Chris Peace, a Republican delegate, who is very strong in these issues as well regarding housing and affordable housing. And we're trying to get a dedicated source of revenue for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund out of the recordation tax over and above. If we have surpluses of $325 million or more, then a certain percentage of the recordation tax would go towards the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And some years we'd get it, some years we wouldn't, but it would be a regular source of funding for this incredibly important program.
So when you say recordation tax, these
real estate.
Okay, I got you. On deeds and other instruments that are filed with local county governments?
Right, yes.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about the new Virginia economy that the governor mentioned in his speech. As a matter of fact, he spent quite a bit of time on the need to develop a new economy in
Right.
in the state of Virginia.
Right. Well, I got to tell you, he's been doing just extraordinary work. I think it's 566 plans that he's announced just since he began as governor. We're talking about thousands and thousands of jobs and millions of dollars coming into the state, and those are important. I'm actually concerned a great deal about the issues of small business, and specifically as it relates to state procurement. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry with regard to state procurement. We have something that we're very proud of in Virginia called our SWAM program, Small Women and Minority-Owned Businesses. The problem with that program, and it's pretty insidious. I've been working on this ever since I was a freshman. It's that the definition of small business in Virginia is one size fits all. It's either it's 250 employees or 10 million in annual revenue.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. And that includes 95.6% of all businesses in Virginia. So who gets hurt?
Small business.
Women and minority-owned businesses. And because it's not truly small, depending on what the industry is, we have a $4.3 billion company named McManus Corporation out of Baltimore, Maryland, that qualifies as a small business in Virginia because technically it only has 13 employees. The rest are contractors. So who gets hurt? The true small business, or the minority-owned business, or the small woman-owned business. So what I tried to do, and have been trying to do for 4 years, is for Virginia to use the federal NAICS codes, the federal size standards for every industry and every sub-industry of every industry, that are updated every 3 years, and that are actually based on regional issues as well. So a tech company that is small might be one size in Virginia, but it might be another size in California, or another size in Texas, or another size in Illinois. I think it's the smart thing to do. I think it's a right sizing, and it's also making everything much more fair for everyone.
So what's the resistance to that initiative?
Well, initially it was, you're a freshman Democrat. And then it was, well, we don't like the federal government. But then after beating the drum again and again and again, we've been getting folks to really listen. And ever since this past March 2015, we've been meeting with a task force and the Secretary Maurice Jones and all of the major players on this, 25 people, and hashing out the details and really having an incredible dialogue here in Richmond, basically every 2-3 weeks until December of last year. And I think we have some kind of agreement. We're very, very close. And so I'm very happy that I think we might be able to get it passed this year. I'm hopeful.
So that draws on your experience with the federal government, does it not? Because you worked at the Small Business Administration.
I was the assistant administrator of the
right,
SBA under President Obama.
Okay. And I also want to draw on your experience as an environmentalist.
Yes.
Because I know you have a lot of initiatives. You've worked in that arena for quite a while and been a big supporter of environmentalism. Talk to us about that.
I have a background in environmental law, and then I went to work in national groups on environmental policy and environmental advocacy, things like the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, and then the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act, then the Kyoto Protocol for climate change back in the 1990s. And then I worked on environmental policy for a U.S. Senator for a few years. And so it's something I care deeply about. I've got several bills this year addressing any number of things from renewable energy to safe drinking water and clean water and small things like making sure that alerts go out if there's some kind of toxic dump into a river or a pond or a stream, that a notice goes out not within 24 hours but in 12 hours, and other things like supporting ag BMPs, agricultural best management practices, so that we can avoid having polluted runoff go into streams and waterways and then eventually in the Chesapeake Bay. And so I think we're making incredibly strong progress in those areas, increasing funding. And I think we have bipartisan support for things like this. But, I mean, there's questionable, I don't know if it's, Virginia recently was named one of the worst states in America for toxic dumping. we need to do a better job. And I think we're taking the kind of steps necessary to move us in that right direction.
What about moving beyond renewable fuel, for example? Those
Beyond
kinds of-
renewable fuel?
Well, when I say
beyond coal and
beyond
oil
coal,
and,
right, and coal and all
yeah,
those, right.
I think we should be the leader in the Mid-Atlantic for renewable energy. The fact is that we could be doing wind off the coast, solar in the valley, hydrokinetic in our rivers. The best place in America to grow switchgrass, which is a biofuel, is in Martinsville, Virginia, a place that's in desperate need of jobs. And also the manufacturing of a lot of wind turbines is done in Roanoke. And where are they being sold? Not in Virginia, in New York. We're leaving literally tens of thousands of jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars on the table in terms of economic development, because we should be doing much more than we are in regards to solar and wind and renewable energy. It should be an everything on the table kind of approach.
So to what extent would that help those who complain about the fact that coal is a dying industry, be it because of competition, be it because of additional rules and regulations?
Well, I think it's more about the economy moving away from coal. It's not regulations killing coal. When it comes down to it, though, with my experience with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, if you've got particulate and ozone in the air, it actually creates more red attainment days, which are bad air quality days, which make it harder to live if you're elderly or if you're asthmatic, and actually contributes to health problems. And so people don't see it, people don't hear it about it. They don't. If they don't, I get upset about this sometimes. If someone doesn't see, feel, touch, or experience it in their own family, well, it's not a problem that exists. And my argument a lot of the time is that about on a macro level, on a lot of different public policy issues, is even though I might not be homeless, I care about people who are homeless. Even though I don't live right next to a river, I care about the fish and having a cleaner environment. And I care about making sure that we have an environment that we can hand down to my kids and my grandkids. And so that's why I care about these issues.
It's sort of like, I mean, you're talking about issues surrounding climate change as well,
Mm-hmm.
and how because it's something we don't taste, see, or feel immediately,
Right.
it's hard for people to get excited about it.
Right, right. And then you see some absurd things, these climate deniers. I gave a speech on the floor last year where we were talking about a bill that would make the General Assembly have to get approval of any plan that went forward to the federal government regarding the Clean Power Plan, which is the Obama administration's attempt to address renewable energy as well as emissions into the atmosphere. And I gave a speech and I quoted NASA, the National Academy of Science, and the Royal Academy of Science. And someone on the other side said that climate change was a liberal hoax. And so, it's very frustrating sometimes because you see at the national level as well. The chair of the Environment and Public Works Committee in the U.S. Senate brought a snowball to the floor of the U.S. Senate and thought that this was somehow an example of why climate change doesn't exist. Climate change is about extreme weather events, increased flooding, more tornadoes, more hurricanes, increased intensity of weather events. It's not about, a snowball. And so you'll see folks post on their social media, I haven't gotten any rain. I don't know, there haven't been any hurricanes this season. But then they ignore the fact that Indonesia has just had some of the most severe hurricanes in a century. Or that in other parts of the globe, you're seeing these traumatic weather events that never actually have occurred in recent memory. That climatologists and Nobel laureates say are a direct result of climate change. And so what I take issue with a lot of the time is the idea that somehow, because you don't see, feel, or touch it, or that there must somehow be a international conspiracy of all of these scientists, which is just absurd. that means we can't do the forward-thinking thing. We can't do what's right to protect the environment and also address climate change.
So what is the state of Virginia doing to promote energy efficiency within state agencies, its vast fleets of cars and vans
The governor
and
has
things
taken,
like that?
Governor McAuliffe has taken some very forward-thinking steps to address the renewable energy in state buildings and to address limiting the carbon footprint of the state government. So he should be commended for that.
And there are these buildings which are called LEEDs buildings, I
Mhm.
understand. Talk to us about what that term means.
Well, it's basically buildings that are built to be environmentally sensitive, environmentally have less of an impact on the environment, less of a carbon footprint. And so you can have gold standard or different standard LEED buildings, which I think are the way of the future. It's also, they're wonderful buildings, but also the fact that they're recognizing that we could do more to reduce the amount of electricity being used and the amount of carbon being emitted is a wonderful thing.
If I have a child who's under the age of 5, am I allowed to give that child a pistol?
Yes. I put a bill in last year to basically say that if you are 4 years of age and younger, that it is a misdemeanor to give that child or allow that child to have access to a firearm. And children who are under the age of 4 are just learning how to name colors. They're just learning how to tell time. They're just sort of learning how to put names to days of the week. They don't have the sense of responsibility to use and care for a firearm. And how many times do we have to see on national TV examples of children getting access to a gun left carelessly in a handbag? Or even when they're being trained to use an automatic weapon by a trained teacher, not being able to control that firearm and then harming themselves and the teacher or other people around them. It happens far too much, and there's more that we could be doing. All I'm asking is that maybe we should address this issue. But what the president has done with his executive actions on guns and gun violence prevention, I think are the right steps. If we can have fingerprint locks on getting access to your iPad,
The new technologies?
we can do new technologies for who can use and operate a firearm. It's only the owner can use that and operate that firearm. You know, there's got to be ways to find a sensible center on these things. My family, I come from a family of hunters. I still go deer spotting and I go hunting with my uncles. And the fact is that they believe that background checks are the right thing to do. They believe that we should have sensible limitations on and checks on who can get access to firearms. The idea that somehow there should be no limitations on the Second Amendment, I don't think it was intended by the Founding Fathers, and I don't think it's a proper interpretation of the Constitution or of the Second Amendment. I mean, we have limitations on, with like speech. We can't yell fire into a theater, and but at the same time, there should be some kind of limitations under D.C. versus Heller with
Right.
the Scalia decision. Right. He actually said, well, you can't ban handguns. There is an opportunity to ban an M16 and certain kinds of deadly weapons. I saw a very interesting report from, I think it was the Brady campaign. Mm-hmm. And it was, they had this small video of a man with a rifle going into an office. And it's all from his perspective. And people are excited that he's walking into this office with a rifle. And he sees someone who was his boss. And he takes a shot at the man who he's angry at. And then the camera pans around, and he's holding a musket. And he's got off one shot, and he misses. So he begins loading the rifle. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm a history buff. Baron von Steuben's original manual of arms in German I could not get a hold of. But I could get a hold of Hardy's manual from 1860 that was used on both sides of the Civil War. And it takes an expert around 22 seconds or 20 seconds to load, prime, and fire a Springfield rifle. An expert, and that's so like 3 shots in a minute. I think that's what the founders were thinking about. They were thinking about one-shot pistols and rifles and muskets. They're not just thinking about an AR-15 civilianized with a 100-round magazine. All right? They weren't thinking about a semi-automatic weapon with a 33-round magazine. They were thinking about a ramrod and the 22 steps that you need to, load and prime and fire your musket. There has to be some kind of sensible gun violence prevention measures that we can come to from both sides of this issue. It's become far too partisan.
So what's the resistance to your bill that would prohibit a child under the age of 4 from access to a firearm?
I've simply been told that it's a slippery slope to other limitations on access to guns.
So ceding any point on the Second Amendment is a way forward to ceding the entire amendment. Is that the argument?
That's the argument. I think that's a fairly, not specious, but it's pretty cloudy.
Sticking with children, I know you have a child labor initiative regarding tobacco farms.
Right, yes. I saw this article in the Wall Street Journal a couple years ago about a human rights campaign effort regarding child labor on tobacco farms. And there are 4 states that basically produce 90% of all the tobacco in the country, Virginia being one of them. And more often than not, we see children, sometimes as young as the age of 9, working in these tobacco fields. The problem is that tobacco farming is one of the most dangerous farming processes there is. And also, the actual tobacco plants themselves are harmful to the children because they run the risk of acute nicotine poisoning. The thing is, children are not little adults. The same kind of exposure to some kind of chemical or harmful product will not have the same effect on you and me as it will a child. It's much more acute for them. And so when they are handling nicotine for hours on end and handling tobacco for hours on end, they run the risk of any number of ailments. We thought that there's got to be a sensible way to address that as well. We understand the importance of heritage, and the importance of handing down these traditions from one family member to the next, and from one generation to the next. And we make we take that into account. But I think I'll keep bringing this bill back until it becomes a law of the Commonwealth, because I feel like it's constantly causing harm to young kids who aren't being looked after in the way they should be.
Transportation is always a huge issue in Northern Virginia, and I take it is no less an issue this year for you and your constituents.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we put nearly enough money into transit as well as transportation and road building. That's an incredibly important thing. The spine of my district is Columbia Pike in Arlington, and that goes into Fairfax. And it is the most heavily used transit corridor for buses in the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. We're trying to build a streetcar line, and then that was scuttled by local politics. But everything with regard to the metro system, with regard to overall transit opportunities, are very important considering the just insane traffic problems we have in Northern Virginia. And so anything we can do to get people to be more sensible about how they get to and from point A to point B, because it's not just people and cars. We're talking about goods and services. Mm-hmm. There was a really fabulous PowerPoint done by Secretary of Transportation under Governor Kane that showed what the current status was of high capacity roads during rush hour in Northern Virginia, and it's 66, 395. 95, the Beltway, and Route 50, and how they were deep red during peak rush hours. And then if we do nothing in terms of transit, over 10 years, the deep red would get longer during the course of rush hour. then longer and longer, until eventually people start having almost every major artery, Route 7, Lee Highway, everything would become near impossible to navigate over a 50-year period of time. And so the transportation bill that we passed during the McDonnell administration was a step in the right direction, but we need to be doing a lot more in terms of transit, and thinking about working from home and things like that to make the region, especially Northern Virginia, a little bit more better, a little bit better for the quality of life.
Let's talk in our remaining few minutes about local education K through 12. What's happening in your district? How are your schools doing? What's the pupil-teacher ratio? Things
Well,
of that
I can
nature.
tell you that I'm incredibly proud of Arlington County Public Schools. We were recently ranked as one of the best school systems in the country. We have a problem, though, in terms of because we're so popular and so good, and our school system is so strong, people are anxious to enter our school system, and so we're having an overcrowding problem now. And but the fact is that we have some of the best ESL HILT teachers in the country, some of the best gifted and some teachers in the country in AP and IB programs, and the diversity of our programs are simply incredible. My wife, who used to work in the private school industry up in New York City, compares the options we have to some of the best schools in the country. We have 2 Spanish immersion elementary schools, 1 IB elementary school, one of only 6 in the country.
What is IB?
The IB, International Baccalaureate, not country,
Okay.
in the Commonwealth. And then Arlington Science Focus, Arlington Traditional School, Drew Model School for Montessori, all different options that people can take advantage of and avail themselves of. And then we have IB High School, and then HB Woodlawn, which is this incredible high school opportunity. We also have the ability to send our children to Jefferson Science Technology. And so each of our high schools are incredibly strong, and bring something very unique, and produce some just incredible scholars.
What about the needs of new immigrant children?
Well, that's something my family's been working on since since I was 11 years old. That's the first I remember. My mom was a high school guidance counselor at Washington Lee High School in Arlington, where she was the guidance counselor in charge of immigrant kids and ESL and HILT kids. And the fact is that she was working on Dreamer projects and the Dreamer kids before we even called them Dreamers.
Great. We're going to have to leave it at
Oh,
that.
well, there you go.
Thanks you for being with us, Delegate Alfonso Lopez.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.